and make decisions that you're comfortable with. Additionally, everybody is expected to be speaking on their sincere opinions without any malice or intent for misinformation. And this call is being recorded, or this space is being recorded. It will be on YouTube within a couple days. And if you guys could take a minute at some point and subscribe so that I can get to 1,000 subscribers so I can live stream these and other space calls in the near future.
All right, let's start. So this is pretty much a rerun from the class that I've organized on my school. So for those who have missed who I didn't have time for that recording file, then that's fine. So I'll teach that. Right, tonight, so the title of our course is Behind Closed Doors. So it's a very, very vague title, basically putting a jab towards the uncharted territory of the financial world, leaving foundations of corruptions, malpractices, loopholes of capitalism, shadow trading, and underground economies with black markets. So tonight, as a precautionary measure, just be advised, we're going to explore the tip of the iceberg of that set of the book's world. The first thing that comes into mind when we're talking about behind the closed doors is the illegal stuff, akin like Breaking Bad with Walter cooking crystal meth and selling his product into the market. Actually goes much more deeper than that. And the worst kind of this uncharted territory are the abuses of said loopholes and of the economy, with top players profiteering over the little guys. So little guys, I'm referring to retail investors. So this type of world may implicate, with many economists, less nefarious groups of activities. This informal economy operating off the books, like said, under the table, outside the sight and reach of government rules and tax rules and tax laws. So, for example, we could use the example of a very, very profiting lemonade stand organized by a bunch of kids selling their drinks during summertime, dealing with cash loan. So this is an example of the local informal economy. Some of the underlying activities of this type of economy may be illegal, but lots of them are actually mundane. So we could imagine a farmer selling his consumable goods on the side of a road, or just a housekeeper being paid liquid, or it could be like a hairdresser trying to make a living despite not having her license from the state. So this informal economy is really hard to measure because there are no metrics to calculate these types of transactions as they are not recorded. So, especially when we're dealing with tax evasion and smugglers not wanting to disclose their accounting numbers. However, there's a way for economists to make a gross estimate of this entire informal economy by looking at the statistical numbers between the total income that a country is reporting and its total expenditures. So, as an example, if people are spending more than what people are legally making or borrowing, the money has to come from somewhere else, right? So that's where we could prove the existence of said informal economy will take in the first place. Another way to make an estimate to judge the size of such said informal economy is judging the electricity usage in your country. So it is also serve as an indicator of total economic activity. So let's say if the usage of electricity is very, very high against a low national GDP, it just means that this informal economy is doing very, very well on the market, operating off the books. So where we're referring to a greater demand in cash which may be indicative of a growing informal economy. So I've already explained what's the informal economy of the book, so that's really very, very common. Now let's talk about the more exciting stuff, the legal side of this world. So as an example, there's the United Nations. As of 2016 statistics, organized crime is $870 billion a year business, with drug trafficking being the most profitable. Illicit activity of this market followed by counterfeiting cash. We could also talk about human trafficking, animal smuggling. So there are lots of contrabands with ivory, tiger bones, furs, whatever with animals. There's actually prostitutions, organ trading, and so on and so forth. So we won't get into details about these as they are very, very delicate topics, but these are actually happening in the informal economy. In countries in development, informal employment could often mean poor working conditions, wages, and increased poverty. Moving away from this, we could talk about monopolies, right? So where a specific market is controlled by one seller with a good that has absolutely no substitute. So monopolies are essentially the antithesis of a competitive market. So in some way, we could look at Samsung and Apple, right? So these are two tech giants competing against each other to gain control of the majority of the market shares for the smartphone market. Or we could talk about giant firms like Vanguard and BlackRock purchasing residential homes at increased markups before the advent of a bearish market, potentially forcing low to middle income earners going into the rental market. And of course, when we're talking about these giant firms making a lot of these residential acquisitions, well, because they control the supply, they are the new owner, they get to control the average rental fee. So in some way, this could be seen as some form of market manipulation called cornering the market, although more operating in the gray area commonly called crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is a way how we view the way of the current market, which is capitalism that is actually engineered by a single party. So that's why we call it crony, because someone is controlling the market shares of a specific market. Monopolies can restrict output and charge higher prices without worrying about competitors. So an example of crony capitalism, right? We see, like, let's say we target a random city, and the market of food trucks is actually booming there. But just imagine, like, there's just one party acquiring all of these food truck licenses from the city, right? So if you have a monopoly, you get to dictate what rules and regulation to influence which political scene to apply for said market to fulfill corporate ambitions. So that's a type of crony capitalism, because it's actually engineered towards one party controlling the entire supply. So when we talk about BlackRock purchasing residential home at increased markup and controlling the supply, this could be seen as crony capitalism, because BlackRock has ties with the government, and the government wishes maybe to repurpose these locations into government-based homes. So a good example of market regulation against crony capitalism, right, or monopolies, was when AT&T tried to acquire T-Mobile, but regulators put a stop to this deal as they considered it would control too much of a market, too much of a share of the wireless communications market. Also, we had a case I believe, yes, it was Microsoft in the late 90s. They were actually pressuring PC manufacturer to pre-install Internet Explorer to outright kill their only competition, which was Netscape back in the day. And this kind of controversy nearly killed Microsoft because they tried to control the entire market of web browsers. Also, in order to counter that, we the market under the Constitution and under fair trade of the Canadian law, we have patents, right? So basically, your patents, you have a right that your product is protected for about 20 years, 20 years depending on which product. So the type of product. So and I believe pharmaceutical products, I believe it's 10 years or 5 years monopoly, if I'm not mistaken. But the patent right has a limited time exclusive for said product whenever you want to register your patent, right? So it is made for a purpose to prevent barrier entry, preventing monopolies, and encourage market competition. So let's say that's a broad, very, very generic example. Let's say a company has created Tylenol, right? Law, and it was based in the United, and if the Tylenol was created in the United States, then the product is insured for a patent protection for 20 years. Until then, because we had this theory of monopolies, which is the antithesis of competitive market. So they cannot control the supply of the entire Tylenol because Tylenol is very, very, very sought product for the entire world. And now because your product is insured for 20 years for protection, then after 20 years, then the recipe of said Tylenol would get sold into the market so people could monopolize and compete against the main company. So that's why we have those antitrust trust laws, market laws to make sure that we don't have some kind of monopolies in the market. So there's that. So moving on to the darker side of things, we could talk about the paper trails, tracing HSBC towards the biggest drug cartels of Mexico, or a considerable gold supply illegally mined, responsible to become components for your phones, your cars, conductors, batteries, legal tenders, jewelries, aeronautical engines. So most of these products, right? Your fucking iPhone, your MacBook, your iPad, most likely your components inside making those chips with the gold. That gold is probably illegal mine, and that supply is actually being used as a front for drug money laundering. So I'm sure that some of you guys have seen the documentary on Netflix. It was called Dirty Money. So same concept. So there's actually a very, very big controversy on how gold is being illegally mined. It's actually shipped to the United States under the cover of said national or international gold money laundering. So how does that even work? So the gold supply, right, to make your phone, your iMac, your cars, has been heavily and illegally mined in Venezuela, Peru, and Argentina. Well, most likely countries from Latin America, right? So these top three countries, we're killing the soil and biodiversity of the Amazonian forest for the sake of creating these gold mines, illegal gold mines. And you have cocaine shipped by smugglers to Mexico and also redistributed to dealers in many parts of the United States, most notably in Miami, because Miami is more like a front for drugs. So these dealers, they regroup that cash, consolidate it, and also, of course, they reroute big pile of money. But of course, they cannot store that cash from drug directly into a bank account because that would raise flags to the DEA and FBI or any related governing agency, right? And not only the bank doesn't want your money because it comes to from illicit activities, it's just going to create more problem. So what they're going to do with that pile of money? Well, what was the solution? Well, they sent this money back to the drug motherland, right? So Venezuela, Peru, and Argentina. And they're going to invest in that pile of money into illegally mined unrefined gold at the cost of very, very cheap labor via shell companies. And of course, these shell companies, they would just like ship that unrefined gold towards the United States through a cargo plane. Notably, the landing strip would be Miami, but also we have shipments coming from, coming to Vegas. So either Vegas or Miami. And of course, these shell companies, right? They would ship that unrefined gold towards the United States, where the shipment would be sold and processed by U.S. refineries. So no questions asked. So the U.S. refinery, what they're gonna ask is that, hey, where did you find this gold? The shell company, they said, hey, we mined this through Peru, and we have this gold. We want to refine it, right? And we want to sell it to you. So the U.S. refinery, they say, okay, it's a business, it's a legitimate business because they cannot find out that it's a shell company. But whatever, they take that order, and the shell companies, well, they sell that gold, that unrefined gold for processing. And the U.S. refinery, well, the human resources in U.S. refineries is just, well, at least the accounting side would just wire that money back into your bank account so that money could be used. So that's how the scheme of gold money laundering is actually into play. So that makes like this entire thing as a entire international drug laundering operation. So maybe you should ask Apple, Lamborghini, or any companies out there to make sure that your gold is not coming from these countries. But most likely, all of these materials that with your life right there that you're currently enjoying, they are probably we're all as consumers, we're indirectly responsible for that drug laundering operation. All right. So moving to financial world, right? Um, in my previous classes, I've already explained the cultural divide. So the mentality of said hedge funds, institutional investor, and retail investor. So retail investor, they like to experiment. They are a bit in the emotional side. They are human, so it's okay to make mistakes. But contrary to hedge funds, right? They deal with numbers, they deal with data, they deal with prediction models, they deal with people, with different companies to gather data, right? To have competition over their main competitors and beat them on the market. So emotions is not involved. And the divide is that as an institutional investor, you have people need to cast aside their emotions and put it in the garbage from 9 to 5 and deal with data all day long. But just imagine doing this for decades or years. You're just dehumanizing yourself. Like you're using the human part of yourself, and that's why they can't afford to be careless. They can afford to be not human because they have been in a game for so long. They got disconnected. They cannot be compassionate anymore. Contrary to retail investors, they know suffering, they know mistakes, they know how to be compassionate. They help each other to stand some kind of ground. But the financial market is actually ruthless, and it's actually being ruled by numbers and facts. So that's where the divide is. And of course, when we're talking about institutional investors, they are very, very wealthy. That means that they have a lot of assets on the legal side, and of course speculatively on the illegal side as well. So why is it so hard to bust these hedge funds in the first place? Well, the thing is that the corporate culture forces employees on a very, very tight leash, because not only these employees are very, very well paid to buy their silence, right? But of course, these employees are under very strict NDAs. So NDAs are non-disclosure agreements, so you cannot speak against the company. Any information related to the company, you cannot speak about them, and the NDAs can last for a lifetime, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. So there's that. And that's why we had this problem with the hedge funds, right? That the price is set, manipulated, or whatever, but they have resources. And of course, it's it's a very, very rare phenomenon to have whistleblowers, because whistleblowers is when we're dealing with very, very big firms, allegedly, we're dealing with potential death sentence. So even with said um, even when you whistleblow information, and you're in case that your company finds who you are, and if you're responsible, well, witness protection won't protect you anymore, because you have been found out, and of course, when you get busted by that company, they could totally bury you. I've seen, I mean, I've heard, being someone from the other side of the fence, right? When I was an intern, before I even before I took my dad's company. So I interned into an institutional bank to learn the trade, and of course, there were horror stories about said employees that they knew him for years and whatnot, and they were very friendly. And the very, very next day, he just disappeared. No records, no legal records, no banking account, no social media. He just poof, gone. And either he was under witness protection, or he just disappeared under said bank. So there's that very, very dark, scary world. And that's when you're dealing with a $1 billion company and you're speaking against them. Well, good luck for you, because I mean, you're all alone. Unless that you're publicly exposed. Of course, if you have a lot of public exposure, and you would hope that public would protect you, right? But wrong, because you have your own only personal assets to defend yourself in court. But when you're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar company, just dealing with an army of lawyers, right? They can't stall your case, trials. They can stall your case with many trials, court proceedings, that they would bust you out on court fees alone. They will make you sit there for a very, very long time, for months, for years, to have the case resolved, and you'll lose. You'll not even make it to the third or fourth trial, because they are busting your nuts financially. And of course, whenever you lose a court case against a multi-billion-dollar company, not only you're going to owe them money, but you're essentially owing a life of servitude, because you have been speaking against them. So that's why I've been saying that even with public protection, if you're not well protected with assets, well, you're essentially screwed. So that's why people are very, very scared on speaking up about this issue internally, and making changes, because that corporate culture is actually very, very toxic in the first place. It shields people at the top and destroys the 99% or whatever. It's very, very toxic. And just imagine living through this for 20, 30 years. That's why, despite there's there's a saying, right, that when you're an empath, you're living in the financial world. Your job satisfaction is decreasing tremendously, despite being paid well, but mentally it's gonna drive you nuts. down the line because you all know this shenanigans and you cannot speak up because of that NDA. All right. There's also there's this side of the government as well. When the multi-billion-dollar corporations, they hire lobbyists to create and kill reforms with senators or politicians. Uh, that's a way of crony capitalism because you want to create some kind of control of your share on the market. Yeah, well, and also we are speaking about many art forms of market manipulation. So right now you're seeing that AMC has been trading sideways for a couple of days now. It's been consolidating. Well, that's good news, but I'm not surprised that I have been delaying orders for a while. Just there's actually a reason as to why your brokerage let you cash out and clear transactions. They give you like a 3 business day to clear out and making sure that your orders are being processed, right? So that's from your level. But also there's an issue about delaying orders from payment of order flow. And there's there's this thing. There's two buckets, right? The first bucket is for the buying orders, and the second bucket is for your selling orders. And of course, that's how, based on supply and demand, you have always a buyer and seller, uh, and a seller to direct your transaction. But the world doesn't operate like that because you have market makers and clean corporations. So market makers, they kind of redirect your orders if necessary to make sure that you're being paid or you have your orders executed. And of course, clean corporations, they just verify if those transactions have taken in the first place. So there's many pieces that regulate the buying orders or selling orders. And of course, when we're talking about AMC, we have more buying inflows than selling outflows into the stock. So the buying orders are being redirected to the dark pools, as many have rightfully indicated, because the dark pools are heavily showing orders, very big disparity or short volume. And a lot of these orders, at least 60% are actually 60% are just reported and the rest are not reported, according to the president of the New York Stock Exchange. So what you're seeing on your screen is not the real price. And of course, there's another bucket, right? Well, there's another bucket down below the dark pools. And of course, this is the bucket that actually explains the 2 to 3 business days of hold whenever your brokerage asks you to clear your orders to wait for your whether you want to deposit or withdraw your funds. And that bucket, right? Well, for in the case of AMC, well, this is the bucket that actually implies the delay of orders. So whenever we don't know how long that bucket would fill, right? But if that bucket would fill, well, the dark pools bucket would fill, and that's where you're going to see the price action being moved. And of course, we do not know the size of that imaginary bucket to have your orders executed, but considering it took like I believe it was 18 or 20 days of consolidation before we popped to $77. And right now, we are at the 14 or 15 day for this kind of bucket to be filled up. and that's the imaginary bucket for to have your orders being executed, and of course to reflect the real market share on the exchange. So we do not know how many days are being delayed, but it is actually safe that we will have another bull run in the next week or 2 weeks, depending on how long that it could withstand those losses from shorting. So there's that. And I'm pretty sure that you have read the filings of the S3, right? The S3 form. So the company has filed this document like years prior, because whenever a company is in the risk of defaulting and they don't want to use the remaining liquidity to dilute the stock to make shareholders unhappy, so instead they're going to use those bonds to sell out to other markets, to institutions, and those notes, right? Those convertible bonds and notes, they can be exercised as a share. So those bonds are actually cheaper. They are being depreciating over time. So hedge funds could buy those to exercise those shares at the fraction of a dollar. And of course, when Adam Aaron he withdrew that S3 filing because he doesn't need to raise capital anymore, speculatively that his equity of the company is sustainable enough for the time being and financially comfortable. But withdrawing that S3 form, just AMC would just have to spend like 78. Believe they're going to just pay out 78,000 for those filing fees, but they're just going to cancel out those convertible bonds. So these hedges, they have the right, whenever they own a bond of a certain company, they have a right to short sell them onto the market. So that's why they have been able to tank the price for years, on top of synthetics and multi-layering of shares, and short ladders as well. So there's that. I've already spotted in some charts even before the run of $14 on AMC. So there is I know you guys know about bull traps. I'm not going over that, but there's actually a tactic called front running the market. So in case that a short is not profitable, they go long on the stock. They buy those in very, very short term. They inject like millions of dollars in cash in pre-market to make sure that the retail investors buy the bait, take the bait, and of course they cannot dump the shares immediately in the first day, because that would be seen as a pump and dump scheme. So they would actually wait. So they inject like millions of dollars of cash into that stock in pre-market, and they're just going to rely on FOMO to increase the stock of the security price even more and more and more. And eventually when the run is over, so that's where they go into a massive short ladder and even sell their holdings to make a very, very big profit. So that's front running the market. And front running the market, if there's actually one of the biggest red flags about to indicate front running the market is that a lot of volume appears in pre-market and there's actually no news covering that insane movement, because retail investors are just like buying into that idea that the press conference would arrive soon, or there's a new product into place. But I guess they're just going to see the price and FOMO into the stock, and of course they're going to back hold their holdings, having those hedge funds making a very short term profit. Uh, yeah, I mean, there's many tactics, and of course, when you see those big days of consolidation, We have been consolidating around $58, $60, 67, $57, and we haven't been moving much. And they have been barcoding the security for many days because of that bucket practice, right? But also because they have been wash trading their stocks. So they're trying to drive down the stock cent by cent and driving more volume into the stock as well, hoping to attract the volume in FOMO. And of course, they're going to force some kind of short ladder if they can to force like millions out of investors back holding their investment. But we know that it's not effective because based on AMC, we control the float, so they cannot do that anymore. So that's one of the tactics. So watch trades, I've explained. Bull trap, you already know what it is. Front running the market, you already know what it is already. I've explained that. Short ladder, you already know. It's essentially box trading in dark pools. They have been using that for speculatively in dark pools. Yeah, I mean that's the gist of it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more going on into the market. Of course, I already explained that they have been hiring like a multi-dollar billion industry that is called lobbying. So lobbying lobbyists are very, very weasel type of people that would influence politicians to have your certain governing policies to correlate towards your corporate ambitions. And of course, I wouldn't be surprised that because of the rulings, there have been some delays, notably because of the 005 or the 801 or 002. It doesn't really matter, but the SEC is doing a bang up job under Gary Gensler, but the problem is those lobbyists putting the brakes of said reforms of the market. Of course, it's very, very apparent when you're seeing commentaries from Susquehanna and I believe Susquehanna and I believe from I'm not sure what was the name again. Was it Wells Fargo or Mudrick? I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but Susquehanna was one of those main commentaries criticizing against those new rulings. So there's that. So there are very, very big counterparties wanting to delay or put a stop to these new regulations into the market, and they have they have billions of dollars to put those brakes. So that's not really, really surprising. And of course, the SEC, in some parts of the SEC, they are complicit about it, but we cannot prove anything, of course. But at least they're doing their job somehow, but it takes a lot of time because of due process. Uh, and changes don't happen overnight. I mean, just seeing the process of court and due process in the United States alone, when it took an entire year to convict a policeman with the footage, the clear footage that he was choking his a fellow countryman with his knee, right? And it took an entire year to convict him for murder. And if we're talking about a legal accountability of hedge funds, well, might take a while. Of course, financial accountability is coming. So when they go bankrupt, they have to pay us. But legal accountability is going to take some time, a year or two, because of due process. And of course, we have been gathering a lot of soft evidence, but we have to rely on the SEC gathering hard evidence to make a case for a court of law. So with FINRA as well as being one of those main market regulators. So there's that. I think that's wrap up for this evening's class. So I've been briefly explaining the concept of behind closed doors. So it's a very, very giant rabbit hole. I just don't want to get into that, but I just want you to rest easy that there's a very, very big shady picture going on in Wall Street. So and you have this kind of picture and what you're dealing against.
You want to do a little bit of QA? We'll bring some people up real quick.
About 10 minutes because I have to take care of family.
All right. If anybody's got any questions, just request now. I'll bring you up, and we'll try to quickly go through 2 or 3 questions. And if nobody requests, we're good. Give it a minute. Right now, I do not have requests. So if that's the case, we'll just we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah, I think I was pretty clear on what happened with the S3, the S3 form. I mean, the hedgies have been using them to short the stock, and Adam Aaron says, nope, not anymore. We're just cutting you the supply, so you cannot dilute the stock anymore.
And them using those bonds or those notes was illegal, right? They weren't allowed to do that, but they were doing it anyway.
I believe that in the clause of what AMC has filed, they said that the bonds were not properly used, if I read the clause correctly, but don't quote me on that.
And just to reiterate, the calls being recorded, not financial advice. Do due diligence, trust but verify, and make decisions you're comfortable with. Big Bucks just jumped up here.
I'm
How are
doing
you?
well, man. Thank you for bringing me up. Kringle, you are awesome. Quick question around the S3. So I keep hearing that it needs approval, and then I heard from other people that it's effective immediately. What's the case with that?
I haven't seen any information that it was actually approved or whatever, it was processed and not, but there was actually a filing of said withdrawal of the S3, so I'm not sure if it's already effective. But they paid, like, I believe that AMC has paid like $78,000 just to file these kind of documents to send to the SEC, so that's all I know.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
And I do not have another request, so I appreciate everybody being here, and hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll have more next week, I'm sure. And tomorrow at 8 Eastern time, I will have a call or a space with the Doc Brothers for Apes Together, the documentary, with a pretty killer lineup of people to discuss that project and the state of everything going on with the AMC Nation or AMC movement. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. Again, if you could please like and subscribe, or subscribe is really more important, to my YouTube channel, so we can get to the point where I don't have to record and then upload, but instead I can live stream and they'll be there real time. That'd be awesome. And please, I can't stress this enough, vote. However you want to vote, vote. This is probably one of those votes where voting is the most important aspect, almost more so than the actual items on the proxy. Above, I've also shared a link, or it's on my page as well, as far as if you want to put a button on your page afterwards on your profile picture to show that you voted, and have that conversation, follow you around wherever you go, so you can make sure that other people vote as well. You can change your vote. So if you vote now and you decide that you want to change it, you can. To me, that's really important, because I think there's so many synthetic shares out there that if everybody waits till the end, we run the risk of the system not being able to handle the volume. So better to vote early, and then if you want to, you can always change it later. All right. With that said, I think that's everything. I'll probably be back on sometime later tonight. But in the meantime, enjoy your afternoon or your evening. And thank you again, Kringle.
Yeah, my pleasure.